Robert knew that the allure of wealth could easily cloak the authenticity of those around him. In his mansion, elegance enveloped him like a velvet shroud, silencing whispers of doubt that often trickled into the back of his mind. The grand hall stood unblemished, adorned with sparkling chandeliers and paintings of timeless beauty. Yet, despite the aesthetic charm, there was a gnawing emptiness that left him restless, simmering in the lavishness of his existence. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Robert decided to put his plan into action. The clouds hung low, draping the world in a melancholic shade, setting a mood that reflected his inner turmoil. He approached the situation with trepidation, knowing that deception could rupture the fragile bonds of love and trust he had with his family. With a heavy heart, he shed his persona as a billionaire and slipped into jeans and a worn-out t-shirt, items he hadn't worn in years. This was the first step in his audacious experiment to uncover true loyalty. As the sun set, Robert emerged from the opulence of his life and wandered into the nearby town. He feigned ignorance, adopting a role as a simple man seeking solace from the chaos of life. Every familiar face he met blurred like a watercolor painting in the rain. It felt liberating, yet painfully isolating, as if he had left a part of himself behind, a privileged self that seemed to belong to someone else. He spent days in this disguise, immersing himself in the local cafe, culture, listening to the laughter of children playing in the streets, engaging with the townsfolk who welcomed him with open arms. Shockingly, there was a warmth that enveloped him in their company, something he hadn't felt amidst the phantoms of wealth. Day after day passed, and he found himself increasingly conflicted. Was he really testing his family, or was he, in fact, searching for his own identity? As Robert resisted the pull of his home, more emotions stirred within him. He recalled the eyes of his wife, Marie, who had once looked at him with trust, her love unwavering in both good and bad times. He thought about their shared laughter, intimate moments, and the way she advocated for kindness and humility. Suddenly, the notion of testing her loyalty felt more like risking the bond they had cultivated over years. The realization built in him the heavy weight of uncertainty. Yet, he pressed on with his plan, eager to return home, curious about the ripples his absence would create. Robert could only wonder how his family would react when the game was revealed. Little did he know, the love they shared would soon face the ultimate test, one that threatened to unravel everything he took for granted. In the shadow of his concealed intentions, love hung delicately in the balance, awaiting its reveal. Robert sat on the edge of the bed in his new apartment, the worn mattress creaking beneath him, remnants of the life he had just shed still echoing faintly in his mind. The walls of the small space were bare, a blank canvas that mirrored the transformation he aimed to execute within himself. Saturday morning light streamed through the single window, illuminating the faded wooden floors and casting long shadows that whispered of change. Though he had traded his tailored suits for fraying jeans and old flannels, the physical transformation was merely the surface of something deeper, something much more profound. As he ventured out into his new world, a cacophony of sounds blended into the backdrop of life. Children's laughter echoed from a nearby playground, blending with the rhythmic hum of passing cars and the distant murmur of conversations that filtered from the tiny cafe down the street. In his previous life, these sounds would have faded into the background, his focus always fixed on the next meeting, the next ascent up the corporate ladder. Here, in this working-class neighborhood, they felt more tangible, a heartbeat that pulsed with life and resilience. His first stop was the corner store, a modest establishment that housed everything from groceries to household necessities. As he pushed the door open, a bell jingled overhead, announcing his arrival. The air was rich with the scent of freshly baked bread, but it was the chatter of locals that caught his attention. He absorbed their conversations, the rhythm of their lives filled with humor and raw honesty. Robert was struck by the ease with which they navigated their concerns. There were no pretenses here, just a genuine camaraderie that seemed to flourish amidst the mundane. He approached the counter, where a burly man with a friendly grin greeted him. "You look new around here," the man said, his voice warm like the sun that streamed in through the open door. Robert offered a hesitant smile, feeling abruptly like an outsider in this seemingly familiar environment. "Yeah, just moved in a few days ago, trying to find my footing," he replied, weaving his faux narrative like a skilled storyteller, hoping to reel in the kindness he sensed lingering in the air. As Robert shared his fabricated tale of losing his job and needing to start over, he could see the flicker of empathy in the man's eyes. They exchanged stories, simple exchanges that tethered him to a community he barely knew. The connection was palpable, and soon he found himself spending longer than he intended, talking about everything from the best fishing spots to local sports teams. Each shared laugh chipped away at the walls he had built around himself, revealing a depth of sincerity he hadn't engaged with in years. Each interaction was a revelation to him, transforming his purpose into something tangible. It was no longer merely an experiment, but a quest for belonging, for authenticity in a world that was often devoid of it. The potential for heartbreak loomed, but there was also the promise of understanding, of discovery, of seeing who he truly was beneath the layers of success and expectation. As he left the store, a small bouquet of sunflowers in hand, a simple gift to cheer up his neighbor, he felt a flicker of hope stirring within him. This new life wasn't just about shedding skin, it was about unveiling the heart. Robert's heart raced as he knelt on the cool, tiled floor of the grocery store, pretending to be utterly engrossed in the mess he had just made. The can of beans that had slipped through his fingers now lay rolling away, a small but vivid reminder of his act. The chaos of the grocery aisle around him was a blur, a cacophony of children laughing, the distant beep of registers, and the rustle of plastic bags. Yet, amidst this noise, all he could focus on was Sarah. As she knelt beside him, her designer outfit seemed oddly out of place against the backdrop of the mundane store. The fabric gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the production of grocery carts and checkout lines. Robert had expected condescension, perhaps a flicker of annoyance at his blunder, but instead, he witnessed compassion radiating from her. Her brown eyes sparkled with a mix of concern and lightheartedness, her lips curving into a smile that softened the moment. "I've got it," she said, her tone laced with that familiar warmth. As she reached for the runaway can, Robert felt an unexpected pang of something akin to guilt mixed with admiration. She didn't look at him as a poor man fumbling through life, but rather as someone worth her time. It was a startling reminder of the disparity between their worlds, wealthy and struggling, designer and discount. Yet here they were, sharing this fleeting moment, an unexpected intersection. "Are you all right?" she asked genuinely, her brow slightly furrowed. Robert internally chastised himself for feeling overwhelmed by the sincerity in her voice. It was supposed to be a game, a calculated move in his plan to integrate himself into her life. Yet, her concern tethered him emotionally, pulling him away from the facade he had carefully constructed. He didn't respond right away, fighting back a wave of vulnerability that threatened to topple the careful balance he was trying to maintain. "Yeah, just a little clumsy, I guess," he finally replied, forcing a chuckle that didn't quite reach his eyes. Her response was a soft laugh, melodic and light, cutting through the tension enveloping him. They locked eyes for just a second longer than necessary, an unspoken connection vibrating between them, tethered to the moment's simplicity. In a heartbeat, the store faded into the background. No clamoring carts, no impatient shoppers. Just him and her, two souls, existing for a brief moment in time. But he quickly drew himself back to reality. This wasn't a fairy tale. They were worlds apart in more ways than one. As she stood, Handing the can back to him with a playful roll of her eyes, Robert caught a glimpse of the spark that drove him into this charade. Her spirit, the woman who seemed to navigate life with such ease and grace. He took a deep breath, reminded of his mission. "Thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate it." In those words, he buried any inkling of admiration that felt dangerously close to sincerity, stifling it under the weight of his deception. It was a new beginning indeed, but he had to tread carefully. Days drifted into weeks, each one marked by a unique constellation of challenges that Robert struggled to navigate, the weight of his current reality saturating. Every moment, he was forced to confront the shifting dynamics in his own life. Lily had always been his sunshine, a beacon of laughter and joy, but the call that evening shattered the day's stillness. Her voice trembled on the other end, a cracking facade that revealed the storm brewing beneath. "Dad, I feel like no one likes me at school. It's like I'm invisible," she confided, her sadness palpable even through the phone. Robert felt a stirring in his chest, a sympathetic ache that mirrored her struggles. This was not the first breath of adversity she would face, but it was deeply unsettling to witness her pain at such a tender age. His instinct was to pull her out of the depths of her sorrow, to offer her reassurances and quick fixes. However, a different urge welled up within him, a yearning to help her cultivate resilience through her own understanding of hardship. Instead of the gentle, superficial platitudes he might have offered in the past, Robert delved deep into his own experiences. "You know, Lily," he began, drawing from the well of his past, "I've faced my share of invisible walls. I remember when I started high school, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. The kids seemed to have it all together, and there I was, just trying to fit in." His voice was warm, but it carried the grit of reality, a textured honesty that was free from the pretense of comfort. Lily listened intently, the melodic hum of her father's voice wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. "I made it through not because I was popular or liked by everyone. I found friends in the most unexpected places. I learned to appreciate the few who truly got me." He shared stories that painted images of resilience, past moments filled with uncertainty, but also moments where kindness transcended social brackets. As he spoke, he could hear her quiet breathing, the hesitant pauses that spoke volumes. It was a delicate exchange, one that transcended the typical father-daughter dynamic. Rather than seeking solace solely for herself, she began to consider how his struggles had shaped him, redefining how she viewed her own landscape of challenges. It struck Robert with unexpected force. His daughter, through her empathy, was offering him emotional support. It was in that fleeting instant of connection where he felt a shift, as if the universe had peeled back a veil he hadn't realized was there. The nourishing truth sunk in slowly. While he had always considered it his duty to protect and inspire Lily, she was defending him too. The realization weighed heavy on his mind, and he began to question the very nature of the test he was facing. Was it merely about surviving adversity, or was it about building a foundation of strength, not just for himself, but for those he loved? In a world filled with apparent chaos, the bond between Robert and Lily was a tranquil island amidst the storm. It was a moment that lingered in his heart long after they exchanged farewells, a poignant reminder that life often invited unexpected lessons through the very trials we fight to navigate. As the sun continued its descent, casting a warm, golden hue over the diner, Robert found himself nursing a cup of coffee that had long turned lukewarm. The laughter and chatter of the strangers around him faded into a distant melody as he spiraled into reflection. He had walked into this diner feeling unmoored, burdened by a perceived weight of financial despair that felt both real and fabricated. The support of the group, their earnest desire to help, had been a breath of fresh air, yet it left him grappling with an unusual mix of gratitude and guilt. While the group had rallied around him, sharing stories of their own struggles, evictions, layoffs, and medical bills, it struck Robert how trust had blossomed in that corner booth, almost like a plant thriving on unexpected nutrients. Here were individuals who had come together through shared vulnerability. They had forged a connection that felt almost too precious to taint with deception. This momentary community, with its laughter and openness, was blossoming as he sat there, haunted by thoughts of his family. Robert recalled the faces of his loved ones, each one etched in the realms of his mind. His wife Lily, whose unwavering belief in his ability to provide had inspired him to chase dreams that often seemed just beyond reach. Would she be proud of him, reveling in the tales of kindness he'd shared? Or would she, upon learning the truth, feel betrayed, as if the support of strangers had diminished the value of their family bond? The clinking of silverware snapped him back to the present. One of the group members, an older woman named Margaret, leaned across the table, her eyes sparkling with a grandmotherly warmth. "You know, honey," she said, her voice brimming with compassion, "we've all faced our demons. It takes a lot of courage to admit when you need a hand." The sincerity in her tone struck a chord deep within Robert. Did he truly need that hand? He'd painted himself into a corner, and yet the honesty of their support suddenly felt like a lifeline. Just as the weight of his thoughts threatened to pull him under, Robert felt the gentle touch of a moment when the door to the diner swung open, allowing a burst of fresh air and sunlight to flood the space. An elderly man walked in, clad in a weathered jacket that appeared to carry tales of its own. He surveyed the diner before planting himself nearby, drawing all eyes with the softness of his expression. It was as if he entered the space with an unspoken understanding of the human condition, that blend of fragility and resilience. The group's conversation flowed, weaving their stories around him, creating an inclusive tapestry that stretched far beyond the confines of financial challenges. There was camaraderie in the air. Attitudes shifted from self-centeredness to collective hope. Robert began to see the narrative not as one of financial inadequacy, but as a universal theme. The shared human experience of need, of reaching out amidst uncertainty. Each story opened a window into the lives of people who had chosen vulnerability over silence. As Robert joined the laughter, relaying his own embellished tale of hardship, he sensed a dichotomy within himself. The urge to drop the facade weighed against the need to feel a sense of belonging. The call for help hadn't simply come from his fabricated plea, but echoed from a yearning for connection. Each smile, each pat on the back from these strangers enveloped him with warmth that felt like a paradox. In moments like these, he thought, perhaps reality was less about financial stability and more about the ties that bind. But as he hesitated, the question loomed larger than life. What would they all think if they learned how he had twisted the truth to fit into this newfound refuge? As the mornings grew crisper and the leaves turned shades of amber and gold, Robert found himself waking with a different sensation. It wasn't the all-consuming rush to his laboratory that used to greet him each day, but rather a gentle stirring, an eagerness to meet his family amidst the chaotic dance of life. The warmth of sunlight filtering through the kitchen window felt like a soft embrace, coaxing him to linger just a moment longer at the breakfast table. He watched as his children argued playfully over who would get the last piece of toast, a scene painted with laughter rather than demands. Each meal became a sacred ritual rather than a mere necessity. The aroma of his wife's cooking wafted through the house, wrapping him in nostalgia. Gone were the days when he would rush through meals, thoughts racing ahead to datasets and experiments. Now, he savored every bite, reflecting on the effort and love woven into each dish. He marveled at how something as simple as a home-cooked meal could foster a sense of belonging and warmth that his experiments lacked. His wife, Claire, bustling around the kitchen, effortlessly juggled her countless daily tasks. A mom, a companion, and also a voice of reason. Robert admired her in ways he hadn't before, her unwavering strength shining through even when fatigue darkened her eyes. It was in the moments they spent together, side by side, peeling vegetables or folding laundry, that his heart ached with a newfound gratitude. Their laughter echoed, and for the first time, he understood the depth of connection that transcended physical space. His heart swelled as he realized that their shared history, the memories they'd woven, formed a tapestry richer than any achievement he sought in his professional life. However, the weight of his deception clung to him like an unwelcome shadow. Although he had begun to value the connections he had, guilt gnawed at the edges of his joy. How could he embrace this illuminated path while concealing the truth from those he loved most? This internal conflict brewed restlessly as he witnessed the innocent trust in their eyes. He wanted to come clean, to share the burdensome secrets of his experiment, but fear gripped him tighter. The very essence of his work, that drive to manipulate nature, sat in stark contrast to the organic harmony he now cherished. In the evenings, as twilight enveloped their home, Robert would often find himself lingering in the warmth of his family. It was during these quiet moments, nestled on the couch while his children recounted adventures from school, that he grappled with his dual lives. A part of him longed for the simplicity of being just a father and husband, free from the confounding complexities of his research. Yet the other part couldn't shake the compulsion to discover the potential of his experiment, a desire rooted deeply within him. In the silence that followed the children's chatter, Robert understood that what he was learning was as much about listening as it was about observing. The bold, decisive strokes of scientific inquiry began to blend with the subtlety of human emotions. And maybe, just maybe, his path to redemption lay not in the precision of data, but in the honesty he could muster, both in his research and in the life he shared with those he loved. As the call ended, Robert was left staring at the dimly lit ceiling of his bedroom, the weight of his family's concern wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. Their voices, filled with worry and love, echoed in his mind, and he could almost hear the sighs of relief when they had heard him breathing on the line. They believed he was unwell, but he felt more like a ghost, drifting through his own life, unseen and unheard. His thoughts turned inward, swirling with doubt and guilt. He could no longer dismiss their worry as overprotectiveness. It was a reflection of his own internal struggles. Had he truly isolated himself so completely that his family had come to believe he needed rescuing? It struck him then how much it mattered to them. They wanted him to be well, to find joy and purpose once more. But in their quest to save him, he felt the stark reality of what he was putting them through. Sarah sat across from him, a quiet presence amid his turmoil. She had listened to the conversation, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Speaking softly, she reached out, her hand trailing across the table toward his. "You know you don't have to carry this all by yourself," she said, her voice a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. "I'm here, and I want to help." Her sincerity pierced through the fog of his self-doubt, igniting a flicker of warmth in his chest. He looked into her eyes, seeing the resolve and support that had become an anchor for him in their partnership. In this moment, he was struck by the depth of what he had nearly taken for granted. Sarah offered not just companionship, but a partnership forged in empathy and shared vulnerability. Her presence illuminated the crevices of his darkest thoughts, and he realized the true nature of their bond. It wasn't just about support, it was about facing life together, no matter how daunting the path ahead appeared. Robert took a breath, wrestling with the emotions that threatened to spill over. He knew he had needed to confront his failures, the stagnant pause that had ensnared him for so long. The turning point, he felt, wasn't a singular event, but a series of moments unified by Sarah's unwavering commitment. He had clung to the idea of independence, but it had only deepened his isolation. He could see now that to rely on her was not a sign of weakness. It was a testament to the strength of their connection. "What if we tackled this together?" he finally suggested, his voice tentative yet building with resolve. "I mean, what if I let you in more? Let's figure this out as a team." A smile broke across Sarah's face, a beautiful, hopeful transformation that lit up the entire room. This wasn't just a call to change, but a promise to himself and to her. He would allow her to share in the burdens he had hoisted upon his own shoulders for too long. In that moment, a quiet determination settled in his heart. The path to reclaiming his life was arduous, but with Sarah beside him, he felt ready to take the first step forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced in the dim light of the living room, Robert felt the weight of impending revelation pressing down on him. The gentle crackle of the fireplace offered a backdrop to the turmoil churning in his stomach. He had practiced his words countless times, yet they felt infinitely out of reach, swirling in an emotional tempest that refused to settle. Sarah, seated on the couch with their children, was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. He was acutely aware of the photographs hanging on the walls, capturing moments of joy and laughter, a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. Each smile in those pictures felt like a testament to the life he had meticulously crafted, a life now resting precariously on the precipice of honesty. Robert's mind drifted back to the initial spark that had ignited this ill-fated experiment, the allure of connection, the promise of understanding. Could any of it justify the pain he was about to unleash? "Everyone, can we sit together for a moment?" His voice quivered, and he hated himself for it. The family looked up, concern etched on Sarah's face, a hint of curiosity in his children's bright eyes. He motioned for them to gather around the coffee table, a familiar space that had seen countless family game nights, heartwarming discussions, and moments of silence shared between laughter. But tonight, the atmosphere felt charged, electric with anticipation that bordered on dread. It took a deep breath to steady himself, to find the fragile thread that connected him to the man he was. "I have something important to share with you all," he began, figments of doubt dancing in his mind. He shifted uncomfortably, his gaze sweeping over their expectant faces. "For months now, I've been living a lie. I thought I was doing it for the right reasons, thinking it would strengthen our family bonds." He saw Sarah's face fall, a flicker of confusion sparking in her eyes. The children fidgeted, sensing the weight of the moment, unaware of its full significance, yet instinctively understanding something was amiss. Robert felt the swell of shame wash over him with every passing second, the heavy truth pressing against the dam of his deceit. "I tried to experiment with how we communicate, thinking that by creating scenarios, fake scenarios, I could teach us all lessons about vulnerability and honesty," he confessed, his voice rising with emotion. "But all I ended up doing was building walls where I meant to foster understanding." The words felt foreign, almost surreal, as they tumbled from his lips. Each syllable echoed the desperation he had tried to bury deep within. Gradually, he watched as confusion twisted into hurt in Sarah's expression, a mixture of disbelief and disappointment that pierced him to the core. Her trust, the pillar of their relationship, trembled under the strain of his revelation. In that moment, Robert questioned the worth of this experiment. Had he ventured too far this time? Had he not only jeopardized their family ties, but also shattered the illusion of safety that they had built together? As the silence stretched on, Robert shifted in his seat, yearning for an answer to the question of whether the truth he unveiled would lead them to healing or fracture them irreparably. The room remained suspended in that moment, a delicate blend of tension and hope swirling in the air. Robert felt an unexpected warmth seep through the fear that had gripped him just moments earlier. Sarah's embrace felt like a shield against the uncertainty that loomed so heavily. It was a fierce statement, this act of love. It crystallized everything he had worried about until now. As she held him, he could feel her shaking slightly, but not from anger. It was an unmistakable tremor of empathy and understanding, as if she were absorbing his turmoil and transforming it into something lighter between them. "Why are you crying?" Robert whispered, newfound vulnerability slicing through his bravado. He pulled back to search her face for answers, for the reassurance that everything would be okay. The kids watched, quietly, their innocent eyes wide, soaking in the affection that knitted them together in this strange, fragile moment. The youngest, Lily, reached up, wiping a tear off Sarah's cheek with her tiny finger. Her action was spontaneous, yet purposeful, bridging the weight of adult worry with childlike simplicity. I just thought I'd lose you," Sarah replied softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Life can throw so much at us, and I've always feared it would tear us apart. I just can't. Imagine raising the kids without you." Her words wrapped around him, filling the crevices in his heart that he'd left vulnerable and exposed. It dawned on Robert how his actions had triggered a conversation he had unintentionally sparked. A conversation about fear and love, about what truly mattered in their lives. He glanced at their children, standing close together, their small forms a reflection of his own anxieties and aspirations. Their eyes were brimming with unguarded trust, an unspoken pact that they would support each other through whatever storms lay ahead. "We're a family, right?" he said, feeling the sinking weight of his own past choices start to rise. Sarah nodded fervently, and it revived a spark within him, urging him to clear the shadows that had begun to cloud their home. "Family doesn't just mean good times and laughter," Sarah continued, her voice steadying as she turned to include the children. "It means standing together when things get tough. And that's when love shines the brightest." Robert's heart swelled as he scanned the faces that surrounded him. Each child embodied a piece of his spirit, and it felt like they were collectively holding each other up in this raw, open moment of connection. Lily, now standing on her tiptoes, reached out to hug him too, creating a little nest, a fortress fortifying their unity. As the rest of the children shuffled in closer, Robert felt the overwhelming power of their bond. In that instant, he realized that, though he had laid bare his vulnerabilities, he had also reaffirmed their resilience. "Together, we're stronger," he breathed, feeling the truth of those words settle deep within him, quelling the tempest that had gathered in his mind. Together they stood, a small army of love, fortified by understanding and compassion, ready to face whatever lay ahead with hearts wide open. As the weeks turned into months, Robert and Sarah found themselves navigating a landscape of emotions they had skirted around for far too long. The weight of unspoken words that had previously hung over their household began to lift, revealing hidden valleys of understanding and empathy that both had yearned for. Each late-night conversation transformed into a ritual, an almost sacred time when the world outside faded, leaving just the two of them, vulnerable but resolute in their commitment to healing. One particularly stormy night, the howling wind outside mirrored the tempest of feelings within. They cuddled, under a thick blanket on the couch, cups of steaming tea cradled in their hands. Sarah began to share fears that had nagged at her for years, confessing how they had once felt like shadows lurking in the corners of her mind. The revelation caught Robert off guard. He had always viewed her as strong and unwavering. Yet, as he listened, each shared story was like a stitch carefully weaving them closer together. "I didn't realize how often I brushed off my worries," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "I pushed them down, thinking they'd go away. But instead, they piled up, until they became something I couldn't carry alone anymore." Robert's heart ached at her words. He recognized the echoes of his own struggles in her confession. The realization struck him that their experiences mirrored each other's, Their vulnerabilities had been shields that kept them apart when all they really needed was to lower those barriers and let the other in. "I've felt the same way," he responded, softly, his hand gently squeezing hers. "It's like we've both been holding our breaths underwater. Now it's time to come up for air." Gradually, they started exploring this newfound emotional territory. They shared not just fears, but hopes and dreams that had been overshadowed by their earlier struggles. Discussions about future vacations, aspirations to build a dream home, or even the small pleasures like growing their own vegetables in the backyard turned into avenues for deeper connection. With each plan they made, a shared vision began to emerge, illuminating the path they could walk together. In the ensuing days, their willingness to be transparent rippled through their family. Conversations that had been filled with superficial pleasantries were transformed into authentic dialogues that allowed their children to express what they felt without judgment. Robert and Sarah set the example, showcasing that strength lay in openness, not in silence. The children flourished in this environment, feeling seen and heard in ways they hadn't known were possible. Their home began to feel radiant with a warmth that had been absent for so long. Gone were the days of pretense. Laughter echoed through the rooms more freely, and even during mundane tasks like vacuuming or washing dishes, they found joy in teamwork. Cooking dinner became a shared venture rather than a chore. Robert would chop vegetables as Sarah stirred sauces, playful banter replacing the earlier silence. In those serene moments, Robert marveled at the shift within himself. He felt more alive, as if colors were more vivid and sensations more intense. The love he had always felt for Sarah was now accompanied by an understanding that drifted deeper than mere affection. It was a love born of shared hardships, a bond tempered like steel and forged in the fires of honesty and vulnerability. This closeness was exhilarating, revealing a part of himself that had long been dormant, now awakened as they continued to rebuild the trust that had once felt so fragile. Robert sat on the porch of his family home, sipping on a lukewarm cup of coffee as the morning sun bathed the backyard in soft golden light. This tranquil space, once merely a backdrop to his busy life, had transformed into a sanctuary of reflection. The gentle rustle of leaves and the joyous chirping of birds seemed to echo the sentiments swirling in his mind. He had spent years chasing professional accolades, accumulating wealth, and building an empire, yet it often felt hollow. Now, the wake-up call from the recent experiment lingered like a guiding star, illuminating a path he was finally eager to tread. He watched his children play in the garden, their laughter ringing like a melodious chime. Each giggle, each shout of joy, became a reminder of what he had neglected in his relentless pursuit of success. The weight of his past choices pressed upon him, yet instead of drowning in regret, he felt a burgeoning desire to be more present, more involved. Every moment spent in their company became a treasure he couldn't afford to overlook. The richness of their conversations, the vibrancy of shared adventures, these were the true markers of wealth he had long dismissed. Encouraged by this realization, Robert took it upon himself to initiate more family activities. He developed a new ritual, Friday night family dinners, where the chaos of the week melted away in the warmth of food and laughter. Together, they would gather around the dining table, the air thick with the scent of home-cooked meals and the spirited chatter of his children. They shared stories, played games, and, at times, engaged in the simplest of activities, picking out toppings for their homemade pizzas or crafting decorations for upcoming holidays. It was during these moments that he learned to truly listen, to appreciate the little things, the way his daughter's eyes sparkled with excitement, or how his son animatedly described his day at school. As he invested time in nurturing these familial ties, Robert also made a conscious effort to reconnect with friends he had drifted away from over the years. A casual coffee catch-up evolved into weekend hiking adventures, which transformed into a brotherhood of sorts. They recounted old memories and shared new aspirations, the laughter drawing them closer with every meetup. It felt like reclaiming parts of himself he hadn't known were missing. The goofy banter and heartfelt conversations became the glue binding their lives. The significance of this newfound depth in connection began to show itself in unexpected ways. Robert discovered that exposing his vulnerabilities, his fears, ambitions, even insecurities, was liberating. Each honest conversation reinforced bonds forged in trust and mutual respect. He learned that every relationship required effort and transparency. In facing the truth of his life choices, he began to rebuild not just his connections, but himself. Each laugh, each shared silence, and even the blended moments of tears shed together formed an intricate tapestry of love and support that he now cherished far more than any material possession. Life, he realized, was meant to be lived, not merely observed. The essence of happiness was not about accumulating wealth. It was about weaving together moments that truly mattered. With every moment spent in the company of those he loved, he discovered a richer, more meaningful existence unfolding before him, echoing that the heart's true wealth lay in love and relationships, not in bank accounts. As summer unfolded its warm embrace, the family's newfound closeness bloomed like the wildflowers that dotted the hills surrounding their home. Every Sunday became a tapestry of shared moments, woven together by simple yet profound acts that transformed their lives. They established picnic rituals at their favorite park, where laughter echoed as they tossed a frisbee under the sun. Grandma's famous potato salad and Uncle Jim's brownies became staples, filling picnic baskets with love, while the surrounding trees stood as silent witnesses to their joy. With each gathering, layers of formality peeled away, revealing the essence of their collective spirit. The once uneasy conversations of the past evolved into a symphony of stories that danced in the breeze. They recalled cherished memories, laughter spilling over as they reminisced about family trips and long-forgotten inside jokes. Robert noticed how everyone's faces lit up with an unspoken understanding, a comforting reminder that connection doesn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes, it merely requires being present. One particular Sunday stood out vividly in Robert's mind. As they gathered on the lush grass, Grandma brought out an album she had kept hidden for years. The family huddled around her, their eyes wide with curiosity as she shared the stories behind each sepia-toned photo. They learned about the struggles and triumphs of previous generations, tales of resilience that resonated deeply within them. Each anecdote nurtured a profound appreciation for their unique lineage, binding them tighter than any material possession ever could. Recognizing this newfound enthusiasm for each other's stories, they initiated a memory jar, where everyone wrote down cherished moments or familial anecdotes on slips of colored paper. At every gathering, they drew from the jar, each memory echoing like a gentle reminder that their bonds were enriched by the threads of their shared history. Robert found himself marveling at how each slip of paper ignited laughter, tears, and heartfelt conversations. These recollections fostered a safe sanctuary where love anchored their souls, bringing forth a sense of belonging that had been missing for too long. Their commitment to giving back to the community soon became an extension of this bond. Weekend afternoons transformed into opportunities for service, where they volunteered at local shelters and assisted neighborhood cleanups. Every act of kindness underscored the importance of gratitude and amplified their sense of purpose as a unit. They discovered that helping others was a powerful conduit for connecting as a family, nurturing empathy within each of them that blossomed beautifully. Amidst these shared experiences, they also cultivated personal connections, creating a tapestry more vibrant than any they had previously woven. When they would gather around the kitchen table, cooking together became a ritual of discovery. Robert learned to perfect Aunt Clara's famed lasagna recipe, while the kids delighted in concocting outlandish smoothies. The kitchen, once a backdrop of hurried meals, was now a creative sanctuary where culinary disasters became cherished tales and shared laughter infused each recipe. Through these joyous, simple activities, the family's hearts expanded, filling the once vacuous spaces with warmth and affection. The richness of life enveloped them, creating a haven where love thrived unabated, casting away the shadows of a once distant past. Their bond deepened, becoming a shimmering reflection of newfound values that transcended the bounds of time and materiality.